right, this will be exciting because we got LA to Abu Dhabi on online right here, and that's always way more fun for international. So, two ends of the spectrum, 12 hours apart. Welcome, Bill, to the Leaders Who Care series.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's good to be here, and thanks so much for accommodating for the time challenge.
Well, the pressure's on now because you got to prove you're a leader who cares. So, the vetting has already been done, but you're gonna prove it. So let's start by, this is the key word, briefly introducing yourself. Not the business part yet, but who's Bill? Where are you from originally? Where are you now? What about your family? Maybe something you've never told anybody in the world you want to reveal now. That's always cool. Go for it.
Yeah. Name's Bill Ashlock. I'm currently residing in Abu Dhabi. My wife and I call Singapore as home base. Born and raised in India. Junior high school in North India, high school in Singapore, then moved to the US and graduated from Oregon State University. So go Beavers, gotta support the whole thing. And if you asked me to say who am I would say I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, I'm an author, I love coaching, I do a lot of business leadership, have over the years. So really around that whole thing of creating visions and empowering people, and let's go out and build stuff and do stuff. So that's who Bill is.
So you mentioned you have kids. How old?
They're young adults or mature adults. So let's put it in perspective. I have 4 grandchildren,
Nice.
2 daughters of my own, and with my wife, we have a total of 2 more kids. So we have 4 and 2 kids on each side. So keeps us really busy.
That's the legacy though, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the legacy. So speaking of kids then, let's try to hear what you were like as a kid or a teenager. Were you the money partner for the lemonade stand type of thing? Or were you in entrepreneurship? Were you studying? Were you in music, sport? What were you like?
I think there are probably 2 or 3 kind of defining things. My father was the father that all young boys at the time dreamed of. He was the shop teacher who drove, the fast cars and the soapbox derbies. And so at a very young age, I learned to start building and using my hands, and he was an old school kind of guy that gave me a bucket of nails and said, you're going to spend the next 3-4 hours learning how to pound a nail. And when you hurt yourself enough, you'll ask for help. I'll give you some instructions, but in the meanwhile, just give it a go. And I want you to empty the bucket. And that became an early kind of independence, learn, grow, experiment. And the second major milestone happened when I was 10 years old, because my father had accepted a job in India. And my brother and I were put on planes by ourselves. I was 10, he was 9. And we spent 3 days going from San Francisco to Honolulu to Tokyo, staying overnight in a hotel all on our own. We had the flight attendants kind of shepherding us. And 3 days later, we landed in India, and I met my grandfather at 3:00 in the morning, who I had only met once in my life. And we lived with him for 6 months until my parents were able to move.
That's amazing. I'm surprised that the hotel let that happen.
Well, I will warn you, we cleaned out the mini box.
I'm shocked.
Everything in there, we tried. We didn't like the alcohol. The soy milk was almost as bad, and it was just and it was that sense of adventure and almost being introduced to being an old soul before your time, because I was the oldest, so I had to take charge and be a little bit responsible. I won't disclose, and this may be the one thing I've never said publicly.
Cool.
On that flight, a young flight attendant taught a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old how to play strip poker. Now, of course, she didn't lose anything. And when we got down to our belts coming off, we kind of drew the lines and said we were out of it. But in the
No
luggage hold of a
kidding.
707, you know, she kind of destroyed our youth, you know, it was great.
Well, it could have been worse, but I mean, in these days, it could have been worse. But
Yeah.
that's an experience. Now I see why you said your mom, when tired, was into cars.
Yeah. Oh, there was, that was a real big thing. I was a kid that grew up listening to Frank Sinatra and a lot of the old music, the vinyl at the time. And in India, it was all about, we had first mini bikes and then bigger bikes and then motorcycles and scooters and go-karts. And so it was mechanical, it was building tree houses and all the things kind of what you used to do or what we hear our grandparents used to do. Without television, we didn't really have radio. We had shortwave radio once a week
Yeah.
type thing. And so it was very much out in nature, out doing things natural with your hands, with friends.
That's
And
so ridiculous. Why would anybody get any benefit out of that?
I know, it's a great point. And I almost need to put it in context because we lived on a missionaries. My father was working for the Protestant church and didn't make a lot of money. He did it for the cause, as the saying goes. And so all of our clothes were handed down. And yes, we were middle class, but this was middle class in India.
Right.
And to put it in perspective, yes, we had a car, but we also shared and everything else. So it was a real awakening to understanding that people were people, no matter whether they had economic wealth or they didn't. They all had the same fears. They all had the same struggles. We all had the same
Right.
longing. And it was, especially for a young child, I had an opportunity to get my first watch when I was 11 or 12. And to do that, I had to earn it. For a nickel an hour, I earned university wages driving a tractor on a farm. Takes a long time to buy a $12.50 Seiko at a
No
nickel an hour.
kidding.
It just takes a long time.
Well, there's a lot of
Uh,
value that's put on clothes and things like that back then that you didn't
yeah,
waste it. You were able to use it again
yeah,
and again. And it doesn't
yeah,
mean you have to do that, but there was something to that that
yeah,
was valuable. And you don't discard things because this is broken or has a
yeah.
stain, whatever.
Yeah, and you really learn to make do. You really learn to share.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to share when you don't have much and other people have needs. So that it became a real connection with people driven childhood.
Yep.
And then at a fairly young age, middle of my seventh, eighth grade year, I went away to boarding school. Eighth grade started it all in North India.
So,
And
so that's what I wanted to segue into. So thank you for giving me a good segue. You talked about your education before briefly.
Mhm.
What intrigued you to go down that path and then into the whole financial services arena?
Well, the interesting thing for me is I came into financial services almost by accident. I came out of university with an aspiration to get into computer programming and computer sciences in that area. Um, I was hired by Ross Perot and EDS, the only one out of the Pacific Northwest, in an era when there was only 3,000 employees. Um, a fairly young company at the time. Um, and discovered I was actually very talented at certain aspects of being a systems engineer. And out of that, ended up getting an opportunity to join a bank in California in a technical capacity. And very early on, they were doing some tests, and much to my surprise, there were two or three areas in banking that I was extraordinarily naturally good at. And it was all linked back to my childhood. And I ended up going through a series of jobs where I was able to make a difference in the way that that bank offered its services to both consumers and to corporations. And it felt good. I mean, it really, it all of a sudden, this connection between interest and success and making a difference all kind of came together. And that started a real awareness of the potential that individuals have, that a lot of times you don't make the immediate connection, but in my case, I was fortunate to see it.
Yeah, so you weren't making loans to people who wanted fast cars, right?
Well, I was a much different way, but it almost the same thing. We had an aspiration to leverage technology in financial services. So I ended up with 3 product lines where I drew a information map of every interaction between the end client and the bank, and every decision point, every data element was used, both manually, because at the time a lot of things were manual. ATMs were just coming into play. And the opportunity was, and we did these massive, they were, if you could imagine, they were probably 4 or 5 feet wide, close to 9 feet long, these printed diagrams. And I redefined the man-machine boundary for those product lines: deposits, credit, foreign exchange,
Wow.
and lending. So I had 4 lines, redrew that man-machine boundary, and all of a sudden understood what banking was all about, and also understood the connection between what someone did in operations or a decision point and the end client, and how it impacted them.
You mean actually
Yeah.
the whole thing? Who would have thought of doing it with everything? So,
Well, and they don't do it anymore. It was an interesting thing of laying it out, and the most fun was sitting with this executive vice president. We took over his conference room, and we laid, instead of it, this was way pre-screens and computers,
I know the feeling.
laid out this massive equivalent of a blueprint and said, "Do you realize this is what you manage?"
Yeah,
And
you remind me
you know,
of much more boring. We put out the 14-page spreadsheet for the when I worked at Deloitte for clients on the boardroom, but we had many of them scotch taped together
right.
that they were like that. So much more boring
Yeah.
than your blueprint, but still
Yeah.
on the same thing before
No,
any
no,
computer
it's the
stuff
same
and all
idea.
that.
Same idea.
Well,
Yeah.
you clearly showed, a tendency and a thread as they were going through this to be a servant leader early. I mean, our firm was
Mhm.
founded on the premise that leaders in their organizations can do way better when they're doing good. Share with us
Right.
maybe another experience or accomplishment that you had in the financial services or fintech arena where you actually evangelized and implemented, and I may even be quoting here a little bit, inclusive services and the importance of equal and affordable access to individuals and SMEs, small, medium enterprises. Can you share about that?
Yeah, I got the opportunity 6 years ago to come to the Emirates, and build a cloud native corporate bank from scratch. Totally a blank sheet of paper. And the interesting question that people asked me along the way was, why were you doing that? What was the driver? What woke you up in the morning, kept you going? And the easy answer is, in the Emirates and the broader GCC, the number of people trying to get access to affordable trade finance that can get access is half the global norm. If you look globally, it's around 60% that apply for it can actually get it. In the Emirates, it was running at the time about 35, 36%.
Well,
And that trade gap is heavily weighted to medium and small enterprises. And I'll go back to a group out of the UK that I worked with for a few years, actually 10 years probably, Transformational Business Network, that the underlying premise was the only way we will solve poverty is through long-term sustainable jobs. What part of the economy creates that is called small, micro and small and medium-sized enterprises. And if they are the ones that we as bankers, and I have personally been on the other side of it, and that's, my journey in caring about SMEs and people and affordable inclusive access started with all the customers I had to force out of the bank. And in seeing the pain, feeling that, and saying, okay, now I can build this corporate bank that can affordably give them access. And then it becomes just an inclusion opportunity. And the fun part about it is we built it modular, we built it composable, we did it all cloud native. The folks at Microsoft and Public Sapiens were amazing partners, and the leadership there were extraordinarily supportive in believing in the vision of what we were trying to do, and bent over backwards trying to help us. And this gets into partnerships, this gets into collaboration. And the fun part is when you tell the story about this, people begin to buy in because it's something they care about. And
Sure.
then, motivation, you don't even have to worry about that commitment. It's already there. People are on the idea that we're here to actually empower SMEs, and they then in turn, as they grow, will create more jobs. And guess what?
Isn't that
The
amazing?
G-
It's not rocket science, but it's a project, obviously, but it's and they're the most loyal customers probably ever.
yeah,
At the end
yeah,
of the day, the taking the next step further, the fourth industrial revolution is about technology, AI for sure right now, which is going to go bananas, virtual, virtual augmented, everything that's going on. But they say the fifth is about humanity, and you've heard the discussions about AI, ethics and get things right and whatnot, and all that, which is super important, and we're very involved in that. But you're recognized for transformational success, basically. What you've done,
right.
and using emerging technologies, digital ecosystem models, and I'm quoting even some stuff, and defined by being humanity centric for the relationships you're talking about, for
Right.
social impact that are proven by KPIs or economic indicators. So there's a lot to unfold there. But can you share experiences that describe the essence of that, the value of that, economically and socially?
So I'll give you a pitch that I made to a central bank.
Cool.
Okay. And it's really, really simple. In a country, it's one particular country in the southern part of Africa, only 24% of all SMEs can get affordable financing of any kind. I mean, affordable, unaffordable, only 24%. Okay. Now, ironically, the majority of business owners in that particular country are women. Okay, now, I don't know if there's a link or not, but what makes the second statistic, these are UN statistics, by the way. The second statistic even worse is the majority of women employing other women only pay them in kind. They don't actually give them a salary. Now, these first 2 points get me annoyed, and I get frustrated. It's like, why can't the banks deal with that? The worst one, which caused me to make the presentation to the central bank on doing a digital bank solution for this, is youth unemployment was running at 45%, and the government's own goal to reduce it was to 42%, which to me was a rounding error. I mean, if you're at 42 and you think that's a good thing, mission successful, it's like, what in the world are you thinking about? And especially given the majority of SMEs' income was based on trade with the government. And I'm looking at that and saying, hey, a simple supply, accounts receivable financing, we know the government's going to pay eventually, blah, blah, blah. Some really simple, basic trade solutions, point of sale devices, digital wallets to allow people to be able to move money without paying the usurious cash fees that everybody's used to. And the irony that we continue to struggle with is the lack of investor commitment that are interested in it. And then you struggle with the dynamic of finding local leadership who are equally committed because they don't trust the system. So, at some point, my passion today is start local, start small. I'm very involved as a co-founder in a startup where affordable, accessible investing is almost an impossibility for a particular group of people in the GCC. And we're here to, it's a little bit in stealth mode, so I don't want to reveal too much. But we want to, for the price of a lunch every month, be able to offer that. And this is for the initial target in just one country is between 3.5 and 5 million people. It's not going to solve the world's issues, but at least it begins to solve for one group of people, and it's a step towards a better future.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's fantastic, because sometimes we try to save the world, which means you end up doing nothing, versus doing something that's really, really concrete in where you are. And even here in the States, small, medium-sized businesses are the heart and soul of employment of everything.
And in general, I'll tell one story in that regards. I'm running ops and technology for one of the big banks that does a lot of business in the US, not to be named. And I was really curious. I said, I'm really interested in the medium-sized businesses. And they said, oh, well, we have 100,000 of those. And I go, really? It seems to me the number would be a lot bigger than that. And I said, no, it's 100, maybe 150,000. I said, nationwide? And they go, yes. I said, well, humor me for a moment. How big do you need to be in order to be a medium-sized enterprise? Now I'm thinking, because there's only 150 or something, they must, it can't be more than 10 million, but maybe, and they go, no, a minimum revenue per year is $100 million.
Oh, jeez.
And I go, well, I was thinking more like an entry of maybe $1 million, or maybe a few 100,000. I go, no, we can't deal with that. Those would be measured in the millions, and we don't know how to support that. Well, wake up, guys. You force businesses that are the heart of your employers, okay, to do business in the riskiest way possible. On what planet is that the right answer for society? And my observation is somebody needs to change that. And in order to change it, we need people with experience that actually understand what banking is about, and risk management, and protecting our clients' monies, and in the old basics. And they're not caught with some of the newer digital players that don't do the AML, that don't do the anti-money laundering, they don't do the KYC, they don't have the appropriate controls. It's like, whose interest is that? That's not helping anybody in the long term.
Have you ever seen the movie Bank of Dave?
Yeah. I have seen extracts of it. I haven't seen the whole thing, but I definitely enjoyed, and having lived in the UK, I have sincere appreciation for how totally evil the high street banks can be. Having
Yeah,
worked
they're
for a
just
couple
trying
of
to trying to destroy him. All he was trying to do is help the community with
them.
loans and stuff like that. On the humanity part, we've found, leaders who care is not just a slogan. It's about working with leaders who really do care, like you're talking about. And they care because they do see the economic and social impact, not charity. Right. They see both of it. And they also care about the well-being of their customers, the well-being of their employees, which also includes financial, physical, and mental, all of the above. And to achieve their individual goals and the bigger goals. Along your way, especially in different countries, you've encountered a lot of diversity, and that's not just of color, but it's backgrounds, cultures, experiences, perspectives, traditions, how they look at money, even, type of thing. And you've also been involved, which is a big part of this whole humanity thing, about on work that you've done on faith initiatives globally. Right. That also is about human beings and what makes human beings, tick, if you will. As you know, one of our strategic partners, has this program called Nonflict, and we're talking to a lot of clients on having a non-flict culture for the significant benefits it brings to the table to resolve what so often happens with small businesses. Conflicts destroy the business as they're growing, rather than having a process to having a process, a culture to resolve conflict, not something like we're going to close down, but how do we get to a best case scenario? Can you share your thoughts about all that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have two very, very strong beliefs. The first one is it is a failure of my generation and my parents' generation that every child growing up between the ages of 9, 10, say 14 on the top side, when they were coming of age, that they were not unconditionally embraced. If there is a single failure that my generation and the prior generation are accountable, it's that. And I don't care whether your kid's at risk. I don't care what they've done. They should know that they are unconditionally accepted, they are unconditionally loved, and they belong.
Sure.
And I look at what's happening around in a lot of the conflicts and a lot of the sense of loss or the sense of not belonging. And to me, there is a direct connection. That's the first point. The second point is I grew up in a society dominated by Hinduism and Islam. At the time that we didn't have terrorists and that type of thing, I've enjoyed an opportunity to visit a mosque. I've enjoyed a lot of Hindu temples. I've even had the opportunity, when it was in the middle of it being remodeled, to have a tour of a Zoroastrian temple. And was profoundly impacted
Sure.
by that, and so much so that there was a interfaith group in New York that I helped found that was all around the idea of learning from the other.
Right.
There are gems of wisdom
Yep.
that divinity wants to share, and I do not know of any one faith system that's got all of it. So wake up. My advice is smell the coffee, take a deep step back, and be in that spirit of listening and learning. And the idea that, especially in conflicts, that my view is superior to your view, and more importantly, I need to triumph so you will be diminished,
Right.
is a false narrative.
As you know, well, probably know, I compare a lot of things to sports and as well. And I've had the opportunity to go to mosques and temples and whatnot too. And
Yeah.
you make a decision to get something out of it rather than just be there. You do get something out of
Oh,
it.
yeah. Yeah.
And sports, it always confused me when media would say, if there's a trade, team A won, team B lost. Well, how do you have a great league if one team is losing in trades, and then your championship, if you win it, what value could it be if the league sucks?
Well, there's another, so I have two responses to it. The first one is that how many trades that the outcome of the trade over time was actually the opposite of what everybody thought
Exactly.
it was going to be. And there are a lot of contributors to why people work with teams. The other aspect, which I think we forget about, is life and divinity and everything around us is trying to teach us. And my question is, who's listening? Now, one of the things I started, and really on behalf of a friend of mine who since passed, was an artist in New York, was the idea of listening to life and how life wants to teach, and practice that and just sharing it. And the view I have is, it's not that my story should be yours or anything I've learned is for you, but please, how do I introduce you to your story? But if I tell you mine, and you'll realize, and what I've done over the last year is I've added photography to that, and it's street photography.
Not glamour shots of you, right?
To my knowledge, none of me. I was thinking about this. There's like 500 pictures and 7,000 articles. So, but they're all about the way life wants to teach. And you keep growing, you keep learning, you keep seeing things differently, you keep getting and some of us, as I'm often reminded, I'm a slow learner at times. It takes a while to connect the dots. And my point is, life doesn't give up on us, so why should we give up on each other?
Yeah, and exactly. And Malcolm Gladwell, I think it was, that said, we always seem to have to want to go outside of our city to bring someone in when there's probably someone just as smart in it. And you don't have to go somewhere exotic to get an experience. He
Right.
said, go to the pharmacy or the drugstore and ask the cashier about her story. How are you doing? She's got
Yeah.
a story too. And it's
Right.
probably pretty interesting to boot. So, and that's
Right.
so enriching when you do that, and you look, and as a result, you look at conflict just as different ideas, different stories, rather than something you've got to literally or
Right.
figuratively kill somebody over,
Yeah, no, it's so true. We have the first microbrewery in the Emirates, and they have a mural scene. And I made the comment, I really enjoyed the mural. It's New Orleans and the whole thing about it. And somebody directed me, says, that is the artist up there standing. And I walked over and I said, look, I just apologize for interrupting. I just want to introduce myself. I'm really curious. From last week when I was here, this picture is different. Why? And she goes, how do you know it's different? And I said, well, I could feel it. And I fortunately took a picture last time. So I went back and I interrogated the picture, and I pointed to the spot. There used to be a person there, and the person's not there anymore. And I could feel the difference in the picture.
wow.
And she goes, well, tell me, did you really think that person belonged? And we ended up having such a fun conversation. And I said, well, it was kind of being ignored by everybody else. And he goes, that was my point exactly. So I took him out. And this is all about belonging. And she went on, and we had this great thing, but exactly as you say, just ask, introduce yourself with a smile.
Be more
And
interested in other people rather than just being interesting about yourself, basically all the time.
yeah,
So I have a last question. We say in LA that you want to leave them wanting more so you can do a sequel. So we'll have to leave them wanting more. But I do want to ask one last question on this part. A client of mine told me in 21 or 22, I can't remember. He said, Mark, the year 2020, the pandemic year, was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought, what a great comment, because sometimes for a lot of people, it feels like the pandemic was yesterday and years ago all at the same time.
yeah.
So with everything that's happened, and now we're into 2024, amazingly already, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Um, I'm still wrestling. My father passed away last year. So the thing I'm most grateful for is the opportunity to be alive. It's pretty basic. The opportunity to be here to celebrate with the grandkids, Singapore, California, my daughters, and my stepson, just watching them become young adults and all that. Extraordinary. The big thing I hope for is with COP28 here in the Emirates, a lot of conversation. Are we going to move beyond the chat
Right,
to actually doing something?
right.
If you think about it right now, Rwanda was what, 30 years ago now?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember being horrified when that occurred. And the saddest part, if you think of 1 million deaths in 100 days, and you now lay that out over the last 6 months, we're well over 1 million people in different conflicts around the world. And who's horrified? Yeah, I know Gaza is a disaster, but we got Sudan, we've got Yemen. We can
Oh,
go
sure.
down through a
I know.
laundry list. The Ukraine, I mean, just, and as much more than I. And what I would hope in this year is we will wake up and take definitive action to protect our grandkids, the generations that now, to create hope, to deal with the people that are stressed. And, my little part is I'm all around affordability, accessibility, and inclusion and financial services. And if I can eliminate the mafias of the world that extract cash with no value, limited value, um, I'll happily destroy those big corporate entities. And if nothing else, maybe they'll just whittle down their profit margins and be something a little bit more sustainable.
I'm hopeful for that
Um,
too. And
yeah,
yeah, thank you for sharing that and all that you do. And I know there's still so much more good stuff to squeeze out of you that's gonna happen. So
for
thanks for being a
sure.
leader who cares. You did show them, and that was good. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thanks a million.
No, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I love your podcast, and I really appreciate some of the testimonies of other leaders you've interviewed.
Thanks.
Inspirational people all. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.